Saudi family, this is the weirdest family tree I've ever seen. A brother marries a wife, then the wife marries the brother, and finally the initial husband marries the wife again. This is the Saudi royal family tree. Let me explain. The founder of Saudi Arabia is Ibn Saud, who had a brother named Muhammad. First, Ibn Saud married a wife named Hafsa. Then Hafsa married Muhammad. Afterwards, Ibn Saud married Hafsa back. Hafsa and Muhammad together had Abdullah, who then married Noura. Now let's freeze here. Who was Noura? Noura. She was the daughter of King Saud, who was the son of Ibn Saud. To be honest, compared with the Japanese emperor, this relationship isn't particularly complicated, but the reason for forming such relationships sounds rather abstract. What was the reason? Poverty. For context, look around you. Here is Rome, here is Byzantium, here is Persia, and here is the Arabian Peninsula. This area was successively conquered by Persia, Rome, Byzantium, and more than 10 other empires, yet none of them were willing to completely govern it. Could they govern it? Yes, but only a little. They couldn't govern more because there just wasn't much need. Take the Ottoman Empire, for example. After invading the Arabian Peninsula, it only controlled the coastal areas. What about the inland regions? Once they entered inland, they realized it was like the world of Three Body, a desert with camels and dozens of fiercely independent tribes. Not to mention whether there was water or fertile land, there wasn't even a proper road. To fully conquer this area, one would first have to conquer the sun. Even the three-body beings would shake their heads. This harsh natural environment where one could only see camel thorns became the best barrier for the Arabian region, but at the same time it froze the local civilization, leaving them in a nomadic stage for a long time. And the instability of nomadic life forced people to rely on bloodlines to maintain internal tribal stability, thus fostering these unique internal desert people. And the Saudi royal family we know today, extremely wealthy, originally lived in this region. Now let's go back in time to 1902. Back then, the entire Arabian Peninsula was in chaos, with tribes constantly fighting and Britain and the Ottomans competing for the coastline. At this time, Ibn Saud, who had established a small kingdom in the desert, prepared to expand his territory. He conquered the neighboring Qasim region, then set his sights on the Hassa region. However, he quickly encountered an opponent, the Turkish army sent by the Ottoman Empire. The two armies fought many battles, but the result was always the same. No matter how many times the Turks won, they never advanced an inch. Why? Because whenever they approached a certain line, the terrain changed. It was no longer a flat open desert, but became rugged mountains, making it impossible for cavalry to charge. And since there were no roads, large-scale troop deployment was impossible. Even if they defeated the Ottomans, they couldn't really defeat the Ottomans unless they marched into the Turkish heartland. However, at that time, Ibn Saud had a small kingdom and lacked supplies. How to solve this issue? Sell yourself out. When Britain learned of Ibn Saud's victories, they saw an opportunity. They promised him support in exchange for control over the interior of the peninsula. So the two sides formed an alliance and began cooperating. After the Ottomans retreated, Ibn Saud led his troops to complete the rest of the unification. However, it was far more difficult to rule than to fight. When Ibn Saud wanted to enter the city to govern, the tribal elders blocked him. They said, "We welcome you to come and help us fight the Ottomans. But once the Ottomans are gone, we still want to live our traditional tribal lives. You can't interfere." Ibn Saud understood that the desert was too big and his manpower was too limited. If he insisted on fighting, it would be a protracted battle. Considering his age and health, he decided to compromise. So he started to marry all the daughters of the tribal leaders, thus forming a very special family tree at the beginning of the video. Through these marriages, Ibn Saud intertwined his family with the tribes. Now, no one could threaten his regime because they were all related. For example, once a certain tribe felt dissatisfaction brewing, Ibn Saud would say, "Okay, since you don't want to work with me, no problem, I'll make my son the king and your children ministers, so we'll still be a family." Of course, this was just a tactic. Ibn Saud actually used these women as bargaining chips to ensure that each tribe had representatives in the court. This way, everyone could feel that they had a voice in the government. However, this led to another problem. When Ibn Saud passed away in 1953, the question of succession arose. According to the tribal system, all tribal chiefs could gather to elect a king. The eldest son of the previous king had no special privilege. Everyone would compete. This meant there would be a power struggle every time the king died, and the contenders might rally various tribes behind them. For example, when King Saud ascended the throne, he distributed oil-related positions and the enormous wealth generated by oil to the tribal leaders. This led to vast wealth inequality. Previously, during Ibn Saud's time, Saudi Arabia was poor, but evenly so. Now, however, oil-generated wealth created huge gaps. Families managing oil grew richer, while oil workers grew poorer. This resulted in two strikes in 1953 and 1956. At the same time, a prominent figure appeared in the Middle East, Nasser, who overthrew Egypt's monarchy, reclaimed the Suez Canal from Britain and France, and faced Western hostility. He turned to the Soviet Union, calling for Arab unity and gaining popular support. This led to Nasserism. This ideology conflicted somewhat with the Saudi royal family. It opposed monarchies, and the Saudi king was a monarch. Thus, internal contradictions in Saudi Arabia became structural. To remain king, one needed tribal support. To gain tribal support, the people suffered oppression. Oppressed citizens might then support Nasser's vision, making it impossible for the king to remain in power. Seeing King Saud struggle, Ibn Saud's third son, King Faisal, allied with his brothers to overthrow King Saud. Then Faisal took the throne and faced the same problems as his father. Tribal chiefs had too much power, and citizens were unhappy with the ruling family. At this time, Faisal had an epiphany. He realized that his family could take advantage of their religious status and influence the tribes. In 1962, Faisal went to Mecca and Medina, Islam's holiest sites, and declared that his family was the servant of the two holy mosques. This meant that the royal family had a divine mandate, so anyone who opposed the king was considered an enemy of Islam. Subsequently, Faisal expanded the kingdom's international influence, improved relations with America, and sponsored Islamic organizations and charities around the world. This approach helped Faisal to restore public order and strengthen his legitimacy. So how did he overcome the tribal